Desmond Baptiste was 38 years old when he landed home 2 weeks early, exhausted from 14 months overseas on a contract that paid off the house and funded his wife's dream business. He'd wired home nearly every paycheck, never once questioned her shortening texts, her scheduled calls. The distance, he told himself, was just fatigue. He wanted to surprise her. He didn't call ahead. He didn't expect his key to fail in the lock of his own front door. Didn't expect the garage code to be the only way in. Didn't expect another man's shoes by the door, a stranger's cologne in the air, a razor that wasn't his in his own bathroom. And he certainly didn't expect to find his wife's boyfriend standing shirtless in his kitchen, pouring coffee like he'd lived there for months. Alicia came downstairs and looked irritated, not ashamed. As if Desmond was the one intruding. He said nothing yet. But standing in his own kitchen, Desmond made a decision that would end everything they thought they'd gotten away with. Before we jump into the story, comment where in the world you are watching from and subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you need to hear. The terminal smelled like burnt coffee and recycled air. Desmond Baptiste sat in a plastic chair near Gate 7, his carry-on wedged between his feet, his hard hat and vest already packed into the check-in luggage he'd dropped off 20 minutes ago. Around him, strangers moved in slow waves, rolling suitcases, tired eyes, phone screens glowing blue in the dim light of the terminal. He barely noticed any of them. He was already home. Not physically, not yet, but in his mind, he was already there. Already walking up the front path, already seeing the look on Alicia's face when she opened the door and found him standing there, 2 weeks early, grinning like a fool. 14 months. That's how long he'd been gone. 14 months of dust and dry heat and 12-hour days crawling over construction sites, checking load-bearing columns, reviewing stress calculations for bridges and overpasses that would carry thousands of people across rivers and desert roads. Important work. Good money. The kind of contract that only came once, maybe twice, in an engineer's career. He'd taken it without hesitation. The house needed to be paid off. Alicia had a dream, a wellness studio, a real one, with massage rooms and a smoothie bar and soft lighting that made people feel like they'd stepped into a different life. She'd talked about it for 3 years. He'd listened every single time. And when this contract landed in his inbox, hazard pay included, salary nearly double his usual rate, he'd sat down at the kitchen table and done the math on a legal pad, the way he always did. Pay off the mortgage, fund the studio, come home clean. He did it. Every month, like clockwork, he wired money back. Not a dollar missed. He'd eaten bad takeout in a cramped work camp and worn the same 4 shirts on rotation so Alicia could build something that was hers. Theirs, he'd always thought. But hers, really? He knew that, and he was fine with it. He pulled out his phone now, the gate announcement still 15 minutes out. He opened his texts with Alicia and scrolled up slowly, the way a man might flip through an old photo album, half expecting to feel warmth. What he felt instead was something harder to name. The early messages, from months 1 and 2, still had her in them. Long paragraphs with typos she never bothered to fix. Voice memos of her laughing at something the neighbor's dog had done. A photo she'd sent at midnight, just a cup of chamomile tea and a candle, with the message, "Can't sleep. Missing you so much it's stupid." He remembered reading that one on a job site, dust on his boots, the sun barely up, and feeling so full he didn't know what to do with himself. But he kept scrolling. Month 7. Month 8. The messages got shorter, crisper. Replies that came at the same time each evening, like they'd been scheduled. Hey, tired. Talk tomorrow. Then sometimes just long day. Good night. He'd told himself it was the time zone, the grind of running a new business. He'd told himself Alicia was hustling, building something, too busy to be sentimental. He'd believed that. "You convinced yourself," a small voice said now, quiet and dry, somewhere behind his eyes. "Because you wanted to." He closed the messages and put his phone face down on his knee. The flight home was 16 hours with a layover in Frankfurt. He slept for most of it, the deep, boneless sleep of a man who had finally finished something. When he landed and cleared customs, he turned his phone back on and watched the notifications populate. A few work emails, a missed call from his sister Odessa that he'd return later, and nothing from Alicia. He hadn't told her he was coming. He wanted it to be a surprise. The cab smelled like pine air freshener and old leather. Desmond watched the city rebuild itself outside the window as they drove. Familiar streets, familiar signage, the slow return of everything he'd left behind. The gas station on Mercer, the bakery with the green awning, the left turn onto Callaway Drive, where the oak trees lined both sides of the road, and the roots had buckled the sidewalk in two places the city kept promising to fix. His shoulders dropped. He hadn't realized how tight he'd been holding them. He paid the driver, pulled his bag from the trunk, and stood at the end of his own front path. The house looked good. Freshly painted trim. Alicia must have had that done. New solar lights along the walkway, the kind that came on automatically at dusk. A welcome mat he didn't recognize, dark gray with a simple geometric pattern. He smiled. He walked up the path, set his bag down, and reached into his jacket pocket for his keys. The familiar weight of them. He found the house key by feel, brass, slightly worn on the bow from years of use. He slid it into the lock. He turned it. Nothing. He tried again, slower, thinking maybe the angle was off. The key went in fine, went in smooth. But when he turned it, it just spun uselessly, like a key trying to open a door it had never met before. The lock had been changed. Desmond stood there for a moment, key still in the lock, not moving. He tried it a third time, slow, deliberate, the way he might test a joint in a structure he didn't trust, looking for the failure point, wanting to be sure before he made a call. Same result. Nothing. He pulled the key out and looked at it. Brass. His initials scratched faintly near the base from years ago, when he and Alicia had a set made together at the hardware store on 5th. He remembered it clearly. A Sunday. She'd worn that yellow jacket she loved, and they'd argued playfully over which keychain to buy. That was the same key. This was a different lock. He stood on his own front porch and breathed in through his nose, slow and even. He didn't let himself think too hard about what that meant yet. He was a man who dealt in facts, load and resistance, cause and effect. A changed lock had explanations, some of them simple. A locksmith visit gone wrong, a security upgrade, a broken cylinder she'd been meaning to tell him about. He did not let himself go further than that. Not yet. He stepped off the porch, walked around the side of the house along the stone path that ran between the fence and the flower bed, and stopped in front of the garage door. The keypad was mounted on the brick wall to the right, same as always. A little weather-beaten now, one corner of the plastic casing starting to lift. He'd been meaning to replace it before he left. He punched in the code. 4 digits. The same 4 he'd set the day they moved in. Alicia's birthday, month, and year, because she'd teased him into it. The door groaned and rolled upward. He ducked under it before it had even fully opened. The garage held both things that were familiar and things that were not. His workbench was still along the left wall, tools hanging on the pegboard in the exact order he'd left them. His level, his clamps, the red toolbox he'd had since his 20s. That part was fine. That part was his. But along the right wall, where Alicia used to keep her yoga mats and storage bins, there was a set of golf clubs in a black bag he'd never seen. A pair of men's running shoes, size 11 or 12, clean white with a gray stripe, sitting heel to toe, like someone had lined them up out of habit. Desmond looked at the shoes for a long moment, Then he walked through the interior garage door and into the house. The smell hit him first. Not Alicia's smell. The warm vanilla and cedar she liked. The particular mix of her candles and her hair products that he'd missed in ways he couldn't explain on a job site in the Gulf. This was something else underneath all of that. Heavier, sharper. A men's cologne he didn't recognize. Something expensive and thick. The kind that hung in a room after the person had already left. He set his bag down quietly in the hallway. More shoes by the front door. A pair of brown leather loafers, good quality. And a pair of slides, both men's, both not his. His jaw tightened. He moved through the living room. Everything looked normal on the surface. The couch, the bookshelf, the rug they'd picked out together at the market on Decatur. But a jacket was draped over the back of the armchair he usually sat in. Dark navy blazer, broader in the shoulder than anything in his closet. He went upstairs. He didn't know why exactly. Maybe he wanted to be wrong. Maybe he wanted a simpler explanation to be waiting for him somewhere in the familiar rooms of his own house. The master bathroom stopped him. On his side of the double sink, where his shaving kit used to sit, there was a clear toiletry bag that wasn't his. A razor he'd never owned. A cologne bottle, the same heavy scent from downstairs. The cap sitting loose like it had just been used that morning. An electric trimmer. A spare toothbrush still in the packaging, shoved casually beside the faucet like an afterthought. Desmond put his hand flat on the edge of the sink and looked at himself in the mirror. His face was calm. He made sure of that. He went back downstairs. He heard the coffee maker before he reached the kitchen. The familiar gurgle and hiss of it. The smell of fresh grounds drifting into the hallway. He turned the corner. A man stood at the counter with his back to Desmond, shirtless, in a pair of basketball shorts, watching the coffee drip into the pot like he had all the time in the world. He was broad across the back, maybe 40, hair low and neat. His hand rested easy on the counter edge. He reached up and opened the cabinet above the machine, the one on the left, where Desmond kept the good mugs, without any hesitation, without looking. The way you reach for something when you've reached for it 100 times before. He didn't hear Desmond come in. Then footsteps on the stairs. Alicia appeared in the kitchen doorway in a short silk robe, her hair loose, phone in hand. She looked up. Her eyes landed on Desmond, and the look on her face wasn't horror, wasn't shame, wasn't the crumbling, desperate expression of a woman caught in something she couldn't explain. It was irritation. Like he was the one who'd walked into the wrong house. Alicia opened her mouth, then closed it. The man at the counter turned around. He was maybe 40, just as Desmond had read from the back. Easy in his own skin, the kind of man who filled a room without effort. His eyes moved from Desmond to Alicia and back again, and for just a second, something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe. Or calculation. Then it settled into something closer to neutral. He didn't say anything. He just leaned back against the counter, crossed his arms, and watched. Alicia took a step into the kitchen. Her hand tightened around her phone. Desmond! Her voice was careful. You weren't supposed to be back until... How long has he been living here? The question came out flat and even. Desmond wasn't looking at the man anymore. He was looking at his wife. He wanted to see her face when she answered. She shook her head a little. It's not what it looks like. How long, Alicia? You've been gone for over a year. She said it like that was the answer. Like distance was a number he could do math with. It's been hard. You don't know what it's been like trying to manage everything here alone. Is this his house? That one landed differently. He saw it in her jaw. A small tightening, a half-second delay before she pushed back. That is not a fair question. It's a simple one. You can't just come home out of nowhere and start. Why did you change the locks? She stopped. The man, still unnamed, still quiet, reached up and opened the cabinet under the counter. Third door from the left. He pulled out a glass. Not a regular glass. The good ones. The thick crystal tumblers Desmond had brought back from a work trip 3 years ago. The ones Alicia kept tucked away and only used for company. He ran it under the tap and set it on the counter without looking up. He knew exactly where they were. "I changed the locks because the old ones were worn," Alicia said. "I was going to send you the new key." "You were going to send it?" "Yes. In 14 months, you hadn't mentioned the locks needed changing." "Desmond, and I would have gotten a new key when?" She pressed her lips together. The man took a sip of water and set the glass down, and then, like it was nothing, like he was just making conversation, he said, "The heat's already running. We bumped the thermostat schedule last week, so it'll kick on earlier in the morning now." He wasn't talking to Desmond. He was talking to the room. Our thermostat schedule. He said it the way a man says "we" when he means this is my house too. Not aggressive, not even deliberate, just automatic. The word of a man who'd been here long enough that it had stopped occurring to him to think about it. Alicia's eyes cut toward him fast. The man caught it and said nothing more. Just went back to his coffee. Desmond looked at them both. He took in the kitchen. The pan on the stove that had been used and left to soak. 2 coffee cups already on the drying rack. A charging cable snaked under the fruit bowl. A pair of keys hanging on his hook by the back door that he had never seen before. He took all of it in. Then he exhaled through his nose, quiet and slow, and turned around. He went upstairs. He moved through the bedroom without letting himself look at too much of it, keeping his eyes and his hands purposeful. He opened the closet on his side. Still his, mostly, though things had been pushed back and compressed. And he pulled out his go-bag from the shelf above the rail. He added what he needed: a few days of clothes, his passport, the small fireproof case from the back corner of the shelf that held his personal documents, his social security card, his copies of the mortgage closing papers. He zipped it. He picked it up. Alicia was standing in the bedroom doorway when he turned around. "Desmond, can we just talk about this?" "We will. I'll be in touch." He walked past her, down the stairs, through the hallway, and out through the garage. The man in the kitchen didn't say anything as he passed. Desmond didn't look back. The hotel room was quiet and generic. Beige walls, a desk lamp throwing yellow light across the comforter. Desmond sat on the edge of the bed with his phone in both hands and stared at the wall for a moment. Then he found his sister's name and pressed call. She picked up on the second ring. "Des?" Odessa's voice was alert even at this hour. "What's wrong?" "I need you to pull something for me," he said. "Quiet, nothing official yet. Everything tied to the house, mortgage, deed, any liens or credit lines, any ownership changes. My name, Alicia's name, any name attached to that property." A pause, short and sharp. "How bad?" she asked. Desmond looked at the go-bag on the floor beside him, the fireproof case sitting on top of it. "I don't know yet," he said. "That's why I'm calling." Odessa's office was on the 4th floor of a squat brick building downtown, wedged between a title insurance company and a surveyor's firm. The hallway smelled like old carpet and printer toner. Her name was on the door in plain block letters. O. Fields, Title Research and Property Records. Desmond had been here before, not often, but enough to know the way. He knocked twice and pushed it open. She was already at her desk. Had been for a while, by the look of it. 2 empty coffee cups pushed to the corner. A yellow legal pad filled with handwritten notes. A stack of printed documents weighted down by a stapler. The blinds were half open, and the morning light came in flat and gray. Odessa looked up. She didn't smile. "Sit down," she said. He sat. She turned her monitor toward him and pulled the legal pad in front of her like she was about to give a briefing. "I started pulling last night around midnight," she said. "Took me about 3 hours to get everything I needed. The deed is still in both your names. No ownership transfer, No quitclaim, nothing like that. That's the only good thing I'm going to say in the next few minutes. Desmond folded his hands on the edge of her desk. Okay. Odessa slid a printed document across to him. It was a loan application. The header read, Home Equity Line of Credit, in bold type across the top, and below it, the address of his house, his full legal name, Alicia's name, a date. He looked at the date. 8 months ago. 6 months into his deployment. $60,000, Odessa said. Drawn against the equity in the house. Application was submitted online. Approval came back in 4 days. Funds were disbursed in a single wire transfer. Desmond turned the pages slowly. His eyes moved down the columns of numbers, the address fields, the income declarations. It was a clean document, professionally filled out. He got to the signature page. There it was, his name, printed first, then signed below in ink, or what looked like ink on the scanned copy. Desmond A. Baptiste. Signed and dated the same day as Alicia's signature, like they'd both sat down together and signed it. He stared at it. He'd been on a work site in the Gulf 6 months into this deployment. He remembered that week clearly. A foundation inspection that ran 3 days over. A crew problem with one of the concrete pours. A phone call with Alicia that lasted less than 4 minutes because the satellite connection kept cutting out. He had never signed this document. He pulled the paper closer. The signature was almost right. The loop on the D, the way the B connected. Someone had studied it, but the pressure was wrong. The line thinned in places where his hand would have been heaviest, and the last name drifted slightly upward at the end, the way a copy drifts when the hand is tracing, rather than writing. It was careful work, but it was traced. "That's not my signature," he said. "I know," Odessa said. She didn't say it gently. She said it like she'd already made her peace with it the night before, and now she was just helping him catch up. "I pulled your signature from the original mortgage closing documents and ran them side by side. The closing signature is consistent across every page. Same pressure, same natural variation, same way you drop the tail on the E. This one," she tapped the loan document, "was copied from the joint refinance you did 4 years ago. I found the source page. The angle matches almost exactly." Desmond set the paper down on the desk. He sat with that for a moment. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the building's heating system and the faraway sound of a phone ringing somewhere down the hall. "Where did the money go?" he asked. Odessa flipped to the next page on her legal pad. The full $60,000 was wired in one transfer to an account registered to a business entity. She slid a second document across, a state business registration printout. Wade Consulting, LLC. Registered 8 months ago, 2 weeks before the loan was approved. Desmond looked at the registration. Registered agent, Preston A. Wade. Business address, his home address. He read that line twice. Preston Wade had incorporated a company, using Desmond's house as the registered business address, and received $60,000 of Desmond's equity into that company's account, funded by a loan signed with a forged version of Desmond's name. This wasn't an affair that had gotten complicated. This was planned. "I need to make a call," he said. Odessa nodded. She got up, picked up both empty coffee cups, and walked to the small side room where her coffee maker lived. She pulled the door halfway closed behind her, giving him the space. Desmond pulled out his phone. He scrolled to a name he hadn't called in a few months. Harlan picked up on the third ring. "Des, what's going on?" "I need you on something," Desmond said. "Formally. I need Preston Wade's full business filings, Wade Consulting, LLC. And I need a timeline of every transaction tied to that entity. Everything." A beat of silence. "How soon?" Harlan asked. "Yesterday," Desmond said. Harlan's office wasn't fancy. It never had been. A rented suite on the second floor of a converted row house with mismatched chairs across from his desk and a whiteboard on the wall that was always half covered in case names and phone numbers. He'd had the same office since he passed the bar, and he'd never bothered to upgrade it, because, as he once told Desmond, the clients who cared about the furniture were never the ones he wanted anyway. Desmond arrived at 10 in the morning, 3 days after the call from Odessa's office. Harlan was standing at the whiteboard when he came in. He turned around, marker in hand, and pointed at the chair without preamble. "Sit down. I've got a lot." It was the second time in 3 days someone had said that to Desmond before he'd even taken off his jacket. He sat. Harlan had a folder on his desk about an inch thick. He didn't open it yet. He went to the whiteboard first and drew a horizontal line across the middle of it. "This is your deployment," he said. He made a mark on the far left. Month 1. Then a mark on the far right. Month 14. That's when you were supposed to come home. He made another mark, 2 ticks in from the right. Month 12. That's when you actually came home. Then he made a mark closer to the middle, right around the halfway point. Month 8, he said. That's when Preston Wade moved into your house. Desmond looked at the mark. "You're sure?" "I'm sure." Harlan picked up the folder and opened it, pulling out a stapled set of pages. "Delta Flight Records, subpoenaed through the legal request I filed. Preston Wade flew one way from Atlanta to your city on the 4th of the month. No return flight booked. No subsequent outbound travel for the next 6 months." He set that page down and lifted another. USPS change of address filing. Preston Wade submitted a mail forwarding request 2 weeks after that flight, listing your home address as his new permanent address. He set that page down too. And then there's this. He slid a third sheet across. It was a delivery log, a furniture company's dispatch record. Desmond looked at it. A queen-sized mattress and a 6-drawer dresser, delivered to his address, signed for by P. Wade. "He bought furniture and had it delivered to your house," Harlan said, "a month after he moved in. The man wasn't visiting, he was settling." Desmond put the delivery record down flat on the desk. He thought about what Alicia had said the morning he came home, her voice tight and defensive, like she was managing a situation rather than talking to her husband. "It's not what it looks like. You've been gone so long, you can't just—" He'd asked her directly, "How long has he been here?" She'd looked away. "It's recent, Desmond. It's not like he's been here the whole time. Month 8, out of 14. She told me it was recent," he said. "I know," Harlan said. He didn't pile on. He just let it sit there the way a good lawyer lets a fact sit, without dressing it up, because it doesn't need it. The wellness studio was in a redeveloped strip of storefronts about 2 miles from the house. It had a clean white sign above the door, the name written in a calm serif font, and large front windows that let the afternoon light pour in across the wood floors. Desmond had seen photos of it on Alicia's social media over the past year. He'd wired the money that built it. He'd never walked inside. Miriam Okafor was arranging product on a shelf behind the front desk when he came through the door. She was small and quick-moving, with close-cropped hair and reading glasses pushed up on her forehead. She turned when the door chimed. "Desmond!" She seemed mildly surprised, but smiled. "I didn't know you were back." "Just checking in," he said. "Wanted to see how things were running." They talked for a few minutes, flow of the business, the class schedule, a new service they were trying to launch. Miriam was genuine. She clearly cared about the studio. She talked about it the way someone talks about something they've put real work into. At some point, she tilted her head and said, almost as an aside, "I'm glad you came in, actually. Some of our regulars have been asking about you. You know how people talk." She gave a small, slightly uncomfortable smile. "Alicia had mentioned to a few folks that you and she had, that you'd kind of stepped away from the marriage. Months ago," she said. "I figured that was between you two, but people were curious." Desmond kept his face still. "What did she tell them exactly?" he asked. Miriam hesitated. "Just that you'd left, that it had been decided." She made it sound like things had been settled for a while. She shrugged, clearly unsure how much to say. I didn't ask questions. It wasn't my business. Desmond nodded slowly. Right, he said. Sure. He thanked her, said he'd be in touch about the business side of things, and walked back out into the afternoon air. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment. The sun was out, but the wind was cold. He put his hands in his pockets. Months ago, she'd been telling people for months that he'd left, while he was wiring money home, while he was working double shifts on a Gulf construction site, while he was planning the life they were supposed to build together. She'd already been writing him out of the story. Harlan had the studio's incorporation papers by the next afternoon. He didn't call Desmond to deliver the news. He just texted 2 words. Come in. Desmond was there within the hour. Harlan had the documents spread across his desk in a neat row, like evidence laid out before a verdict. He let Desmond sit down first. Then he pointed. Walk me through what you were told, Harlan said. About the studio. About how it was supposed to be set up. Desmond kept his voice flat. Joint ownership. My name and Alicia's. That was the agreement. I wired the startup money, $62,000 from my hazard pay, on the condition that we'd both be listed as co-owners. Harlan tapped the top page. Pull that one toward you. Desmond pulled it. It was the LLC registration for the studio, filed 18 months ago, right around the time the lease had been signed on the storefront. He scanned down to the ownership section. One name, Alicia M. Baptiste, sole member. He read it again. Then he set the paper down carefully, the way you set something down when you're afraid of what you'll do if you're still holding it. Keep going, Harlan said quietly. The next page was an operating agreement amendment, filed 9 months ago, right around the time Preston moved into the house. A new section had been added. It listed a silent investor with a 5% equity stake and profit-sharing rights. The investor's name was a company, Wade Consulting, LLC. Desmond sat back. He thought about the $60,000 from the forged HELOC, wired to Wade Consulting. And now, Wade Consulting listed as a stakeholder in the studio his hazard pay had funded. The money had moved in a circle, out of the house's equity and into a business built with his own overseas earnings. And at the end of that circle, his name was nowhere. She cut me out of both ends, Desmond said. Yes, Harlan said. There was nothing soft about the way he said it. It was just a fact, and it deserved to be treated like one. How solid is the documentation? Very. The original filing is public record. The amendment is time-stamped. And the capital contribution records, the wire transfers from your overseas accounts, those are also documented, which means we can show the court exactly where the startup money came from and exactly whose name got left off the paperwork. Desmond nodded slowly. He thought about Miriam, about the way she'd talked about the studio, with real pride, real investment. She didn't know. He was almost certain of that now. She'd been building something genuine inside a structure designed to deceive. He needed to go back. Miriam was locking up the back supply room when Desmond returned to the studio just before closing. She looked surprised to see him again so soon. A little guarded, too, like she could sense something had shifted since his first visit. "Do you have a few minutes?" he asked. She studied him for a moment, then nodded, and gestured toward the small table near the front windows. They sat down. Desmond didn't ease into it. He asked her directly about the finances, who handled the books, how capital contributions were tracked, whether she had ever seen documentation listing her as a co-owner or just a partner in operations. Miriam's expression changed slowly. The warmth stayed, but something careful moved in behind her eyes. "I was told we were equal partners," she said. "That's what Alicia said when we started. But every time I asked to see the actual paperwork," she paused, "there was always a reason it wasn't ready yet." "And the money?" Desmond asked. "Do you know where the startup capital came from?" Alicia said it was from savings. "Joint savings," she said. Hers and yours. Miriam folded her hands on the table. Desmond, what's going on? He didn't answer that yet. Was there ever a time you overheard her talking about the ownership structure? With anyone? Miriam went quiet. Then she said, About 3 weeks ago. I was working late in the back office, and I didn't realize Alicia and Preston were still in the building. She paused. They were in the hallway near the studio entrance. The door was thin. I could hear pretty much everything. What were they saying? Preston was angry. He kept saying that Alicia had promised him something, that his stake would be protected, that the amendment guaranteed it, and Alicia was telling him to calm down, that everything was fine. Miriam's jaw tightened slightly, but then she said something that stuck with me. She said, "Whose name is on what is my decision, and it always has been." She shook her head. I didn't know what to make of it. I figured it was a business disagreement. It wasn't, Desmond said. He told her enough. Not everything, not yet, but enough. The forged signature, the shell company, the capital contributions that came entirely from his overseas earnings. Miriam sat very still while he spoke. When he finished, she didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she took a slow breath. I helped build this place, she said quietly. I know, Desmond said. So did I. He called Harlan from the parking lot before he'd even reached his car. We have enough, Desmond said. I know, Harlan said. I've been waiting for you to say that. Then let's start building. Already am, Harlan said. Come in tomorrow. We'll go through all of it. The call came on a Tuesday morning. Desmond was sitting at the small desk in his hotel room, a cup of coffee going cold beside him, when his phone lit up with Alicia's name. He stared at it for 2 full rings. Then he picked up. Hey. Her voice was warm, soft, the kind of soft she used to use when she wanted something. Hey, he said. I've been thinking a lot. A pause, carefully timed, like she'd practiced it, about everything, about us. I think we jumped to a bad place really fast, and I don't want that. I don't think that's fair to either of us. Desmond said nothing. He waited. I was hoping we could actually sit down and talk, she continued, like adults, like people who spent 9 years together. Another pause. I'd love for you to come to the house. I'll make dinner. We can actually talk through things properly, without all the... She let it trail off, like she couldn't find the right word. Like the argument in the kitchen 2 weeks ago was just a misunderstanding between 2 tired people. That sounds reasonable, Desmond said. Yeah? He could hear the relief in her voice. Real relief. She'd expected pushback. Yeah. Good. She shifted. Her tone stayed warm, but picked up a slight business-like edge. I also thought, while we're together and the mood is right, it might be a good time to take care of some paperwork, just to simplify things going forward. Nothing dramatic, just a quitclaim form on the house, something to keep things clean and uncomplicated while we figure out next steps. There it was. Desmond kept his face neutral, even though no one was watching. He let a short silence pass, just long enough to seem like he was considering it, not long enough to seem suspicious. Sure, he said. We can look at whatever you have. Perfect. And now the warmth was back. Fuller. Thursday? I'll make that lamb dish you like. Thursday works, he said. They said goodbye. He set the phone down on the desk and looked at it for a moment. A quitclaim deed. He knew exactly what that was. A quitclaim deed didn't just simplify things. It was a full transfer of ownership. If he signed it, the house would be solely and permanently Alicia's. No fraud case, no HELOC complaint, no lien alert would matter anymore, because he'd have handed the whole thing over voluntarily, in writing, with his real signature this time. That was the move. Get him emotional, get him hopeful, soften him up with a home-cooked meal in a familiar kitchen, and then slide a page across the table while his guard was down. He picked the phone back up and dialed Harlan. Harlan answered on the first ring. "She called," Desmond said. "Reconciliation dinner. Thursday night. She wants me to sign a quitclaim on the house." There was a brief pause on the other end. Then Harlan said, "She's moving faster than I expected. She doesn't know what we have." "No," Harlan said. "She doesn't? Which is exactly why we need to move today." His voice was calm and certain, the way it got when his mind was already 3 steps ahead. "I'm filing the fraud complaint with the bank this afternoon. The forged signature on the HELOC application. And I'm placing a lien alert on the property before end of business. The lien freezes the funds, freezes any further draw on the equity line, yes, and it flags the property so that no deed transfer can quietly slip through the county recorder's office without triggering a review. Even if she somehow got you to sign that quitclaim Thursday night, it wouldn't record cleanly." Desmond let out a slow breath. "Good. You still want to go Thursday?" "Yes." "Then go," Harlan said. "Let her think it's working. The more comfortable they feel, the harder they'll fall when you put everything on the table. You'll have the full documentation ready by then?" "I'll have packets for both of them." Harlan's voice had a dry, quiet edge to it. Everything organized. Forged signature with the comparison samples, the HELOC wire trail to Wade Consulting, the studio incorporation showing sole ownership, the amendment listing Preston's stake, the capital contribution records from your overseas accounts, and the timeline proving Preston was in that house by month 8. A beat. If they want to dispute any piece of it, they'll need to dispute all of it. "That's exactly what I want," Desmond said. "I know," Harlan said. "Go rest. Let her spend the next 2 days thinking Thursday is her win." They hung up. Desmond sat back in the hotel chair and looked out the window. The city moved below him, indifferent and busy. He thought about the lamb dish she'd mentioned, the one with the rosemary and the slow-roasted garlic, the one she used to make when she was in a good mood, and the apartment was warm and small and theirs. He let himself feel that for exactly 1 moment. Then he pulled the folder of documents from the nightstand drawer, opened it to the first page, and got back to work. The porch light was already on when Desmond pulled up. The house looked the same from the outside. The oak tree in the front yard, the gray shutters Desmond had painted himself 3 summers ago, the cracked corner of the 3rd porch step he'd been meaning to fix before he left for the Gulf. He sat in the car for a moment, just one. Then he picked up his leather portfolio from the passenger seat, got out, and walked to the door. He didn't knock. He rang the bell. Alicia answered quickly, too quickly, like she'd been watching for his headlights. She was wearing the burgundy dress she knew he used to like, her hair soft around her shoulders, and she had a smile already arranged on her face. Warm, practiced. "Hey," she said. She stepped aside to let him in. "I'm glad you came." "Smells good in here," Desmond said. It did. The rosemary and garlic hit him the moment he crossed the threshold. He stepped inside and took in the room quietly. The dining table was set for 3. Good plates, real cloth napkins, the candles she only brought out for company or occasion. And there, tucked beside the small floral centerpiece, was a manila folder, thin, neat, positioned just close enough to his seat to be convenient without being obvious. He clocked it, said nothing. Preston was standing near the kitchen island. He had a glass of red wine and the relaxed posture of a man who believed he was holding all the cards. "Desmond!" He said the name like they were old acquaintances, like this was a normal thing. "Preston," Desmond said. That was all. Alicia moved them toward the table with that hostess energy she had. Graceful misdirection, keeping everything pleasant and forward-moving. The lamb came out. Wine was poured. For 20 minutes, they ate and talked about nothing. The weather. A road construction project on the east side of town. Preston mentioned something about a new client. Alicia laughed at the right moments. Desmond ate. He listened. He was patient. Then Alicia reached over and touched the manila folder with 2 fingers, sliding it gently toward him. "So," she said, her voice still easy, "I wanted us to have a chance to eat first. Be human about this. But I do think, while we're here and calm, it would be good to handle that paperwork I mentioned." She opened the folder. The quitclaim deed sat on top, clean and formal, with a pen already clipped to the first page. "It's really just to simplify the transition. Keep things from dragging out." Preston nodded. Supportive. Measured. Desmond looked at the document for a long moment. Then he looked up. He reached into his leather portfolio and set his own folder on the table. Flat. Unhurried. "I'm not going to sign that," he said. His voice was calm and even. "But I do want to go through some paperwork with you both." He opened his folder. 8 months into my deployment," he said, "a home equity line of credit was taken out against this house. $60,000. He placed the first document on the table and turned it so they could both read it. "That's my signature on the application. Except it's not. It's a traced copy of my signature from our joint refinance in 2019. The pen pressure is wrong, the baseline angle is wrong, and a forensic document examiner has already confirmed it in writing." Alicia's smile faltered, just slightly. Preston went still. "That $60,000, Desmond continued, placing the second document down, "was wired directly to an account belonging to Wade Consulting, LLC. He looked at Preston. "Your company." Preston set down his wine glass. "Flight records and change of address filings confirm you moved into this house during month 8 of my deployment." Desmond placed that page down too. Methodical, steady. "Not recently. Not after things fell apart between Alicia and me. Month 8, while I was still overseas, still wiring money home every month." The room was silent, except for the low flicker of the candles. "The wellness studio I funded with my hazard pay," he said, "was incorporated solely under Alicia's name. My capital contributions are documented. Every transfer from my overseas accounts." He placed the records down. "Preston was listed as a silent investor. With my money." He looked at Alicia. "And for months before I came home, you told your friends and clients that I had left the marriage." He said it without heat. "Just the fact. You were building the story before I even landed." The silence that followed lasted about 4 seconds. Then Preston said, "You told me the divorce was basically done." His voice was low, tight. Alicia turned to him. "Don't do this right now. You said it was a formality, that he'd been gone, that it was over. You never said anything about a fraud complaint or a forged. You're the one who needed the money protected," Alicia snapped. "You're the one who said we needed to move fast before he got back. You pushed for the HELOC. I told you to talk to a lawyer. You said to handle it. I said—" Desmond closed his portfolio. He buttoned the top button of his jacket, picked up the leather folder, and stood. Neither of them looked at him. They were already somewhere else, deep in the wreckage of what they'd built together, tearing at the seams, each one pulling in the opposite direction, while the whole thing came apart. He walked to the front door and let himself out. The porch light was still on behind him as he went down the steps, past the cracked third one, and back to his car. The letter from the bank arrived on a Thursday. Desmond knew it was coming. Harlan had filed the fraud complaint 4 days before the dinner, and the bank's compliance department moved faster than either of them expected. A certified letter went to the house. A second one went to Harlan's office. A third went to the address on file for Wade Consulting, LLC. Harlan called Desmond that morning, his voice steady and satisfied. "The lien freeze is fully active," he said. "The remaining balance on the HELOC is locked. Neither of them can touch it." "How much is left?" Desmond asked. "About $11,000. The rest is gone." Desmond did the math quietly in his head. $60,000. 11 remaining. 49,000. Spent. "Where did it go?" he asked. Harlan paused. That's where it gets interesting. Preston found out the same way Desmond did, through documents. Harlan had subpoenaed the full transaction history of the HELOC disbursements as part of the fraud filing, and the records showed something that hadn't been part of the original plan. Of the $60,000 wired to Wade Consulting LLC, Preston had moved $31,000 into his own operating accounts. That part Desmond already knew. But the remaining $28,000 had been quietly redirected. A wire transfer, routed not through Preston's company, but through a secondary account, one opened under Alicia's name alone, tied directly to the wellness studio's startup expenses. Preston hadn't known. Desmond learned this not from Preston, but from Miriam. He met her at a coffee shop 2 blocks from the studio. A corner table, morning light coming through the window, the soft noise of other people's conversations filling the space between them. Miriam wrapped both hands around her mug. She looked tired in a way she was trying to hide. I found out 3 days ago, she said. I pulled our incorporation documents after you and I talked last time. I started going through the startup deposit records. She shook her head slowly. $28,000 came into our studio account from a wire I didn't authorize and didn't know about. Alicia told me it was a private investor. She never said where it came from. It came from my house, Desmond said. Miriam closed her eyes for a moment. I put 18 months into that studio, she said. I believed in it. I thought we were building something real. She opened her eyes and looked at him. I didn't know any of this. I want you to know that. I do know that, Desmond said. And he meant it. She was quiet for a moment. Then, what happens now? Desmond reached into his portfolio and set a single page on the table between them. Clean, simple language. Harlan had drafted it 2 days ago. The studio was built with my capital, he said. The forensic trail is documented. Every transfer from my overseas accounts. The HELOC wire, all of it. Harlan is filing to reclaim my ownership stake based on the source of funds. He let her read it. I don't want to tear down what you built. You ran that studio. You were there every day. I was in the Gulf. Miriam read the page slowly. I'm offering you a real partnership, Desmond said. Documented, equal, nothing hidden. She looked up at him. I'm done with Alicia, she said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't dramatic. It was just a fact, delivered flat and final, the way someone speaks when they've already made a decision and are simply telling you about it. She signed the page. The fraud investigation didn't pause for anyone's convenience. The bank's compliance team escalated the forged signature finding to their fraud division within the week. A second letter arrived at the house, this one addressed to both Alicia Baptiste and Preston Wade, referencing the HELOC application and requesting documentation. There was a phone number to call, a deadline printed in bold. Neither of them called. Inside the house, the temperature had changed. Odessa still had loose connections through mutual friends, and the reports came back in pieces, small, consistent, and grim. A neighbor mentioned raised voices on a Tuesday night. A mutual friend said Alicia had stopped returning calls. Someone else said Preston had looked for a short-term sublet, and then stopped looking, without explanation. They were staying. But staying had a different shape now. It wasn't the shape of two people choosing each other. It was the shape of two people who had built something crooked together and now couldn't walk away from the mess without drowning in it alone. Preston blamed Alicia for the $28,000 she'd moved without telling him. Alicia blamed Preston for rushing the HELOC before Desmond came home. He said she'd told him the marriage was over. She said he'd pushed her to act fast to protect his investment. Round and round, the same circuit, neither exit in sight. Desmond signed his legal separation papers on a Friday afternoon in Harlan's office. His hand was steady. The pen moved without hesitation. Harlan slid the signed copies into a folder, clicked it shut, and looked up. "That's done," he said. "Yeah," Desmond said. He exhaled slowly through his nose. "It is." He stood up, buttoned his jacket, and picked up his portfolio. He had a meeting with Miriam in an hour. 8 months is a long time. Long enough for paint to dry on new walls. Long enough for a name to be removed from a sign and replaced with something better. Long enough for a man to walk back into his own house, set his keys on his own counter, and feel nothing but quiet. Desmond stood outside the studio on a Friday evening in November, hands in his coat pockets, looking up at the new sign above the door. Groundwork Wellness. Clean white letters on a deep green background. Simple. Solid. The kind of name that didn't need to explain itself. Miriam had suggested it. Desmond had agreed in about 4 seconds. Inside, the lights were warm and full. A small crowd moved through the space. New clients, a few press contacts Miriam had invited, some people from the neighborhood who had watched the renovation from the sidewalk and were finally getting a look inside. Soft music played. Someone had brought flowers. The front desk had a clean new sign-in book, its first page already half full with names. Odessa appeared beside him, a glass of sparkling water in her hand. She wore a deep burgundy dress and had her reading glasses pushed up on top of her head, like she always did when she was in a good mood, and had forgotten about them. "You going to stand out here all night?" she said. "Or are you going to go inside and enjoy it?" "I'm enjoying it from here," Desmond said. She looked at the sign, then at him. "Mama would have liked that name," she said. He nodded once. Yeah, she would have. They went inside. The evening moved the way good things move. Easy, unhurried, without anything going wrong. Miriam worked the room with the natural comfort of someone who had been in that studio every single day for the past 8 months. Someone who knew every corner of it, every client's name, every class on the schedule. She caught Desmond's eye from across the room and smiled. Not the tired, uncertain smile he'd seen at that coffee shop 8 months ago. This one was full. He smiled back. A woman named Clara, one of their first new members, stopped him near the back wall to tell him that the morning yoga class had already changed her life. She used those exact words. He thanked her and meant it. A photographer from a local lifestyle publication moved through the room quietly, taking pictures without disturbing anyone. A couple near the window asked Desmond about the studio's story, how it got started, what the vision was. He kept his answer simple. "We wanted to build something that lasted," he said. They nodded like that was exactly the right answer. By 9:30, the crowd had thinned. Miriam said her goodbyes at the door. The last guests filtered out into the cool November air, still talking, still warm from the evening. Desmond and Odessa stayed to help straighten up, stacking cups, folding a few chairs, turning the lights down one room at a time. Miriam hugged Odessa at the door and then turned to Desmond. "Good night, partner," she said. "Good night," he said. She left. The studio was quiet now. Just Desmond moving through it alone, checking the back windows, turning off the last lights, doing the small closing tasks that nobody sees but everybody benefits from. He'd done the same thing in his house lately, walked through each room before bed, not anxious, not checking for anything wrong, just present, just his. The house was his again. The court had finalized it 3 months ago. The fraud finding had been clear, the documentation airtight. Harlan's words, delivered with no small amount of satisfaction. Desmond had driven home that afternoon, parked in his own driveway, walked through his own front door, and stood in the kitchen for a long moment without moving. Then he'd made himself a cup of coffee, sat down at his own table, and breathed. He was pulling on his coat near the front door when Odessa's phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced at it. Her expression didn't change much, but her chin lifted just slightly. The small tell she'd always had when something landed exactly the way she expected it to. "That's Dana," she said. Dana was a mutual friend, someone who still lived near Alicia and Preston's neighborhood. Their small rented apartment across town, the one they'd moved into when everything came apart, was apparently not a quiet place to live near. Odessa turned the phone toward Desmond so he could see the text. They're at it again. Heard them through the wall. Something about a bill. Sounded bad. Desmond read it once. He handed the phone back to his sister. He picked up his keys from the front desk, turned off the last light, held the door open for Odessa, and followed her out into the night air. The street was quiet. A few cars passed. Above the studio door, the green sign caught the light from the street lamp. Groundwork wellness, steady and still. Desmond locked the door. He put the key in his coat pocket. He walked to his car. He got in, started the engine, and pulled out onto the street, heading home. I hope you enjoyed that one. Be sure to like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story. I've picked out 2 more for you that I think you'll really like.